Welcome back. I think this is going to be our last time to have to pause recording. So again, I apologize. So in the matter of DAR, this has to do with the extent to which law enforcement can interrogate students at the school. It definitely gets cloudy when you have an SRO on campus because law enforcement is right there. And at what point are they, working as law enforcement versus working, with the school? So in the matter of DAR was a 13-year-old who was, quote, taken into custody when the SRO questioned him at school about possession of a gun. The boy confessed that there was a gun, but not before the officer advised him of his rights. So this is where it gets cloudy. Has the officer read him his rights? Is he detained? Is he in custody? What is allowed and what is not allowed. So the confession was suppressed by the student's lawyer got involved. So they suppressed the confession. And their reason was because the armed officer, which was the SRO, was alone with the student with the door closed, and the student was not told that he was free to leave or that he could call an adult to assist him. And so I think this happens more often than not when SROs are involved. They pull the kid in for questioning. They have no idea of their rights. They might admit to something that more than likely they did or didn't do. And then after the fact is when, lawyers get involved or they say, you couldn't question my child because I wasn't in the room and that kind of stuff. So that's where it kind of gets cloudy. Also, there was a case of RJ versus McKinney ISD, and the school called law enforcement when the assistant principal found that RJ, who happened to be a middle schooler, had started a fire at the school. So the student confessed to the assistant principal. The AP had RJ sign a written confession. The AP then called law enforcement and told them what happened, and they arrested the student for attempted arson. Right after this, the parents sued that the confession was improperly extracted from the student and that law enforcement should not have been called. However, when this went through the court system, they supported the assistant principal in what he did. Okay. So students need to be read their Miranda rights if they're, quote, taken into custody. They need to know that they're not being held without will or, against their will, that they can have an adult representative there. And, sometimes parents coach their kids in that. They're told, if you're ever pulled in by someone, then you call me immediately and I'll be there. And lastly, suspension from extracurricular activities. So this always seems to be a big one. The book was really funny. It talked about, the ABC, so athletic, band, and cheerleading. And cheerleading is always happens to be involved in cases, with extracurricular activities. So there is no 14th Amendment protection attached to extracurricular activities. It is a privilege and not a right. So you are not guaranteed to make the varsity cheerleading squad. It is a privilege. You can be removed from activities without any formal due process because it is a privilege and not a right. So there's 3 cases listed there. The NCAA versus Yao. So Yao was a swimmer who transferred from the University of California to UT. The NCAA, as most of us know, requires her to sit out for a year. That can be waived by the University of California, but they didn't because, she was a world-renowned swimmer, and why would they let her compete a year earlier? So UT, however, did not interpret that rule the same way and told her that she could swim. The NCAA got involved and said, no, you can't actually swim. Yao then sued UT because it violated her due process and possible future earnings is what she claimed. And then the argument was rejected by the Supreme Court. And so kind of the final on that case was it doesn't matter if you're a high school cheerleader or if you're a world-renowned swimmer, extracurricular activities is a privilege and not a right. So Flower Bluff ISD versus RS. Here's a cheerleader. So the cheerleader was caught in possession of a prohibited drug at school and was sentenced to 36 days in DAEP. That was no problem. However, in their code of conduct, their cheerleader handbook, she was not allowed to be a cheerleader anymore. I know, so sad. In the student handbook, it said if once a student was put into DAEP, they could no longer be a cheerleader for Flower Bluff ISD. The parents complained because they said it, violated her due process. She was deprived of her property and liberty because being a cheerleader at Flower Bluff High School, that was her future. But the courts disagreed with the parents, and they agreed that since it was put into the code of conduct, then that's kind of the end deal. And then lastly, Ryan G versus Navasota ISD. So he was a baseball player, and he was found to be a minor in possession of alcohol over spring break. Shocking, I know. So the coach suspended the player from the team as it was written in their student handbook, that if a student was caught with alcohol or charged with MIP or whatever, then they were suspended from the team. The parents appealed to the commissioner, but the commissioner found the rule to be proper. It was put in their student handbook. The parents all signed them. So same thing with the Flower Bluff case. The parents signed them and they were kept on file. And the court said, sorry, no go. Extracurriculars is a privilege and not a right. So there's a little disclaimer that fairness and good common sense for administrators go a long way. Obviously, have it in your handbooks, have them signed by parents and students so that they know exactly what they're getting into. There were several times when I was an athletic trainer, because of course, keeping paperwork was part of my job. We would have the baseball coach call and say, hey, pull so-and-so's paper. And, it had to be in there that their parents signed the extracurricular code of conduct, because they knew that the standards that their child was being held to and what the consequences were should they participate in behaviors unbecoming of a cavalier. So also, your little disclaimer here is that you must be sure to not improperly discriminate. So not a good idea to have different set of rules for cheerleading versus band versus the tennis team. So if you have a complete extracurricular code of conduct that covers all your extracurriculars, that's probably the best policy to have. So I am done with my part. Thanks for being awesome and sitting there. So sorry I couldn't be at our last class with you. However, I'll just see you on Tuesday because we keep right on moving. So Betty, I think maybe it's your turn. I don't know. Whatever. See you later. Have a good, safe rest of your Tuesday night. Bye.